Episode 3 of Season 4 of House of the Dragon explained and its metaphor city this week. Let's kick things off with the situation in Tumbleton, and finally we have acknowledgement of who Daeron is, but at what cost? The Hightowers in Tumbleton had a huge leap in screen time this week, amounting to around 12 minutes of the episode. In comparison, that's almost double than what we've previously seen of Ormund and the real Daeron. The episode opens up with the Hightower army having the townspeople of Tumbleton dragging in logs into the town, most likely to bolster the defences with pikes and such. From there, the army is assigned to various houses in Tumbleton, dispersing the army throughout the town houses. This is done to help protect the army. Usually they would encamp outside the city, but as we saw with Aemond and Harrenhal, that makes you an easy target. By embedding the army with the civilian population, it makes it harder to specifically target the Hightower army, which is Ormund's plan all along, and one of which Rhaenyra's seemingly forgotten 1 week later. The small folk are not the only victims, as Ormund has taken up residence in Lord and Lady Footleys' home, essentially making them guests while he enjoys their luxury abode. The Footleys do mention though that they don't have battlements, and here Jon Roxton gives him a letter from Boros Baratheon, who is still dilly-dallying. Boros does have an army numbering in the thousands, and in the books he's actually fighting a guy called the Vulture King in Dorne for the 600th time instead of leading his army to aid the Hightowers. Very naughty of the Stormlord, considering he had a marriage pact with Aemond. Ormund's put all his water into a leaky bucket as it's bad news after bad news, and he learns Boros delays and they have yet to hear from Aemond and Harrenhal. Instead of an army of 21,000 bolstered by Vhagar and Tessarion, it is only 15,000 supported by arguably the smallest combat-ready dragon in Tessarion. I do love his little line about sending Boros a letter with pictures to better help him understand, as the Lord of Storm's End is illiterate. Things do take a turn though, as Ormund has to administer justice in his camp as one of his men try to assault one of the residents of the town. Surprisingly, he keeps true to his word and has his man punished by having him castrated and his arm broken. This is done to help appease the people of the town to help keep unrest at a minimum. The last thing he needs is the townspeople rioting against him from within the walls whilst Rhaenyra's forces wait outside. However, this calm demeanour soon sours when word reaches him of Aemond's abandonment of Harrenhal and apparently their cause. It's a crash out of the ages and understandable, but it is clearly not an isolated incident, as both Daeron and Loxton knew what was coming and how to handle things. It's a crack in the veneer that Ormund likes to present. Cool detail in the background is one of his smelling dispensers. Febreze should really get in on this. I honestly don't think he could cope with the stink of King's Landing.
Oh, you can smell the shit from 5 miles away.
Maester Orwell informs Rhaenyra that Otto had written many a letter to Ormund and received no response. This could be a lie considering Larys had Otto locked up and wouldn't go beyond reasonability that he also intercepted letters. But this does lead Orwell to believe that Ormund ruled Old Town as its own kingdom. This is given further credence by Ormund and Daeron's final scene, where he has a victim of a Hightower soldier's assault brought forwards, and wants Daeron to execute him. Ormund gives a monologue of sorts of the taint of Targaryen blood in their dragons, echoing the thoughts of the Septon last week who forsworn Rhaenyra. This is the biggest change to the books. As a viewer, I was disappointed that we had yet another guy on the green side just be a total bastard. I was hoping to have someone who had a bit of backbone but was also righteous, fighting for a cause he believed in, without then having to turn into a full sneaky villain with this ploy. Earlier I mentioned that there was a cost of not revealing Daeron sooner, so let me explain that. When Ormund and his host marched from Old Town towards King's Landing, it was fighting off a bunch of Rhaenyra supporters in the Reach. At one point, it seemed Ormund's host was doomed as they were surrounded and were going to be destroyed, until Daeron arrived on Dragonback and saved the army and his uncle and destroyed the attackers. With Daeron's vital intervention, Ormund knighted his nephew and dubbed him Daeron the Daring. From there they marched forth from the Reach to Bitterbridge, then Tumbleton. With Daeron able to scout ahead on Dragonback, this helped them avoid ambushes. By removing Daeron's moment of triumph, we've also rewrote more of his history. In the books, Daeron was raised in King's Landing alongside Jacaerys Velaryon, with Viserys hoping that these boys being raised together would lessen tensions. That didn't work, but Daeron only leaves for Old Town when he's 12, not when he was a baby. He also has the traditional Targaryen features of silver hair and purple eyes. With these changes, we're not only giving Ormund the greater focus, but also the story of trying to usurp the Targaryens and remove the dragon blood. Just how far is Ormund willing to go to that extent is going to be interesting, but he's clearly manipulating Daeron to do as he wishes and bending a possible future king to his will. Ironically, when Tessarion eats the body of the victim, it climbs all over the Star of the Seven, which to me shows that the dragons are still the strength of the land and will trample across the faith to feed itself. Keeping it green, Criston and Gwaine arrive at Harrenhal but do not find Aemond. Alice informs them that Aemond's fled. In actuality, Aemond and Criston arrived at Harrenhal together as Vhagar gave Cole's army important aerial cover. It was when they arrived that they separated, as they had different thoughts on how to continue the fight. Aemond went nuts when he heard King's Landing fell and began burning the Riverlands in retribution, whilst Criston decided to join his army with Ormund's. The force in the TV show seems much smaller, as Cole mentions that the opposing armies are 20 times that of his. Cole's book army is around 4,000 men, which would mean the opposing army is 80,000, so the show army has definitely been scaled down to a couple of hundred rather than a few thousand. He proposes that they will conduct a guerrilla warfare on the travelling Tully army to hit their supply lines and where that travelling army is weakest. He's heard the stories of 20 good men, it seems, probably through the Weirwood network. In the Crownlands, Aegon is finally reunited with Sunfyre, whom many have assumed dead. Sunfyre's in bad shape and hasn't moved since his fall last season. Aegon does believe Sunfyre is alive, and I would agree with this. Symbolically, Sunfyre and Aegon are linked. They are both scarred from their battle at Rook's Rest, and many believe them dead. So when Aegon likely reveals his identity once more, I can imagine Sunfyre taking to the sky again to rejoin his former master. Unfortunately, that's yet to happen as Aegon and Larys arrive at Rook's Rest, the home of Melise's headless body. Larys claims they are survivors of Sharp's Point, the town that Aemond burned in his anger in last season's finale. Aegon bristles at the idea of collecting shit and piss for a day job and hits boiling point when he receives no food after his hard day's work. Irony, given that the people under his rule also suffered from food shortages and would starve. Now he's gotten a taste of life outside of the Red Keep and, well, something a bit more to teach him some humility. Back in King's Landing, and we get the reveal that Helaena is pregnant, and whose baby I'm not quite sure, because I had to figure out how much time has actually elapsed throughout the seasons. Season 2 takes place immediately after Season 1, and episode 4 of Season 2 took a few weeks. But then Aegon, who was horrifically injured at Rook's Rest, has been rehabilitating for months. The easy answer is it's somehow Aegon's, but we just don't have a sense of passing of time to keep us up to date. If Helaena is X amount of months gone or not. Hopefully no funky twists, but that would be Aegon's third child with Helaena and likely the missing Maelor, who might still have a role to play. But talk about funky timelines. Over on Team Black, Daemon's been a busy boy as he arrives in the Vale seeking recompense from Lady Jane Arryn for her lack of soldiers. She refutes his claim by stating that Rhaenyra barely sent her a dragon to help protect them. They eventually come to an agreement as she hands over 10,000 gold dragons. As Daemon plans to leave the Vale, Caraxes drags Daemon's ass to Sheepstealer's Cave, where Daemon comes across his estranged daughter, Rhaela, and she reveals her part in Jacaerys' death. I kinda dig the look they're going for with Rhaela here. She's visually getting closer to the Nettles imagery from the book. I just wish they had kept Nettles rather than merging the two characters together. Condor, the showrunner, has spoken about wanting to merge them because they already had 3 dragon seeds with Orth, Hugh and Adam. And they also had Rhaela, who sort of does nothing. So I can empathize with that train of thought. We'll see where it goes, but Rhaela refuses Daemon's offer to return and to abandon Sheepstealer, so she flies off. And Daemon, being Daemon, spots an unfortunate scapegoat. Like, literally, the guy's farming goats. Back in King's Landing, and Rhaenyra begins to tighten her grip, maybe a little too tightly. Though on a positive note, her small council and Queensguard vacancies are starting to fill up. Her new Queensguard is Adrian Redfoot of the Vale. I don't think he's actually mentioned by name of the show, but his presence is felt immediately and throughout as Rhaenyra's shadow. especially when Ulf mentions the Queen of Bastards graffiti. Man seems like a good loyal pick. Maester Orwell has been reinstated as Grand Maester. For reference, Maesters are usually neutral and serve the people who currently hold the seat of whatever town or city they are assigned to, though that doesn't make him any less cunning or believable. Rhaenyra asks him about the hold of Old Town might have over the faith, which we've spoke about previously. She also requests to see any letters to Ormund since her father's passing. Now, when Orwell later says there were no returned letters, it could be that he is hiding information from Rhaenyra. He's a man who can switch sides and make himself seem very useful, and considering he asked whether Rhaenyra wanted to remove the High Septon permanently, he's not squeamish about throwing people under the bus. Torrhen Manderly of the North is appointed Master of Coin, a departure from the books, as Rhaenyra appointed Bartimus Celtigar. Buckmaster of Coin was an absolute disaster as he enacted heavy taxes on the people of King's Landing to make up for the shortfall of the missing treasury. Doubling taxes on wine and ale, whilst port fees were tripled, the man even made a show of public executions by charging people to watch. You can imagine how much the people of King's Landing loved that. Man pioneered pay-per-view, truly ahead of his time. Unfortunately, Torrhen is named as the fall guy to take any blame off of Rhaenyra's shoulders and put it on his for the missing wealth or upcoming taxes that will be required. During Daemon's return, you can hear him ask Daemon if any of the Vale Bannermen have sent anything, as they've yet to hear anything from the Great Houses, and the Iron Bank has rejected their loan requests, before mentioning the idea of implementing a new tax. Rhaenyra has put the gathering and managing of the gold on both Torrhen and Daemon's shoulders, so a recipe for disaster, as Daemon wants the gold cloaks paid to ensure King's Landing is kept under control, much to AOM's displeasure. Daemon informs Rhaenyra that Sheepstealer's Dragon Rider has been dealt with, and she states that the gold is to be paid to the small folk, which is what Mysaria wanted. When he argues with Mysaria, she asks whose head it is. So again, this is going to be a cause of friction in future, especially as Mysaria has placed herself opposite Rhaenyra on the council table. When we first met Corlys, he was sat there as the most powerful man on the council. Tyland also occupied that seat during the Green Council, and now it's Mysaria, who has the cause of the common people close to her heart, and this might put her in direct opposition with Rhaenyra. Because when Ulf comes calling for some favours after leaking gold at the tavern, he is promptly told he shall no longer frequent such places as he belongs to the crown and his safety is of the utmost importance. This is a man who wasn't allowed to style himself Targaryen, isn't really getting the rewards he wants, and is now forbidden to go into his favourite bar because he belongs to Rhaenyra. Now, apparently Ulf can't read, and neither can some of the small folk, as they ask a more well-off lord what the graffiti says. When you think about it, it's pretty funny because you have to wonder how many people can actually read the graffiti in King's Landing. Who is it aimed at? With Ulf losing his freedom, he clearly knows what would rile up Rhaenyra, so in retribution he tells her of the graffiti, and that the people are protesting her, none of which actually happened because the Lord mentioned it was written by Hightower loyalists who haven't realised they lost the war. This clearly triggers Rhaenyra though, who wants that graffiti removed and those responsible found, an overreaction which causes the gold cloaks to go out and terrorise the small folk. Tyrion has a great line in the books. When you tear out a man's tongue, you are not proving him a liar, you're only telling the world that you fear what he might say. Oh, and before I forget, Corlys has buggered off, so his son Alan sits in his place on the small council. Bit of a wild change that makes sense within this story. It's just Buck Corlys is very much a big part of the political picture in King's Landing in the books. Removing him is just a little problematic, but he's going to clean up some of the crown lands. So I do wonder if he'll come across Rook's Rest.